Donald Trump seems rather unimpressed by the latest UN Security Council sanctions targeting North Korea. He says the new resolution is nothing to write home about.
We think it's just another very small step, not a big deal. Rex and I were just discussing. Not big. I don't know if it has any impact, but certainly it was nice to get a 15-0 vote. But those sanctions are nothing compared to what ultimately will have to happen.
Well, it's certainly disturbing to hear these words from Donald Trump in the aftermath of a vote at the UN Security Council that was widely perceived as a victory for diplomacy. The words that we heard from U.S. leaders on the floor of the Security Council were rather diplomatic and favorable to peace and cooperation. At this point, we're hearing U.S. leaders again talking harsh, talking about the possibility of sanctions against Russia and against China if they don't comply with the new UN resolution.
If China doesn't follow these sanctions, we will put additional sanctions on them and prevent them from accessing the U.S. and international dollar system. And that's quite meaningful.
So now we have these words from Trump downplaying the UN resolution, and many people whose hopes had really been raised for peace and diplomacy being victorious, well, those hopes are starting to dampen. There's starting to be some fear that perhaps once again we are in the danger of a global conflict or some kind of war breaking out, and the crisis in the Korean Peninsula could be once again intensifying, despite what was seen as a step forward for diplomacy and international cooperation.
This is just another dip on the roller coaster, it seems. It seems that every week the war rhetoric goes up very high, and then maybe there's some conciliatory talk, some cooperation, some diplomacy, and then more threats of military force. And it's really hard to know what to make of this. Yes, we do have a positive that the original U.S. draft was watered down considerably. It was acceptable to the Russians and the Chinese, but then we have this fire-breathing talk coming from Pyongyang. We don't know what the next step is going to be. To me, the real question is going to be, when do we actually get to a diplomatic track that allows both sides to step down? And to my mind, that's got to be something like the double freeze proposal that China has put forward and the Russians agree with, but is absolutely unacceptable to Washington, it seems.
It's not only the White House that's dissatisfied with the new sanctions. Pyongyang's not too happy either. North Korea's ambassador to Russia says it's delusional to believe that the North will break under sanctions.
We've been under US sanctions for 10 years. It was the US that instigated the UN Security Council to come up with more resolutions on sanctions against North Korea. So we're used to living in such conditions, and we still managed to achieve everything we wanted. If Washington thinks we'll bend under these new measures and change our position, it's delusional.
Author and filmmaker John Pilger believes the problem lies not with Pyongyang.
The problem is not North Korea, the problem is not Russia, the problem is not China, the problem is the United States. The problem for the rest of the world actually now is the containment of the United States. Sanctions are irrelevant in a sense to this whole debate. What is needed is a peace treaty with North Korea between the United States and North Korea and the government in Seoul. But where it's all heading is the most worrying thing of all.